My son texted me 4 days before Thanksgiving to tell me I was no longer welcome at his table, because his wife said having me there made her uncomfortable. I didn't cry. I didn't call him screaming. I just said okay, set down my phone and started making a different kind of plan. By the time the turkey was half carved at his house, they were both regretting it, because what they didn't know was that I was the reason there was a turkey on that table at all, along with a roof over it, and about 6 other things they'd taken for granted for years. If you're the kind of person who believes quiet dignity can hit harder than any shouting match ever could, tap that like button right now before we go any further, and subscribe if you haven't already, because I've got a lot more where this came from. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I love knowing how far these stories travel, and I read every single one of them. Now let me tell you how a 72-year-old widow ended up teaching her own son a lesson he'll remember for the rest of his life. My name is Barbara. I'm 72 years old. I've lived in the same small house in Ohio for 31 years, and until 4 days before Thanksgiving, I thought I had a pretty good relationship with my only son. His name is Michael. He's 44 now, though in my head he's still 11 years old, asking me to check under his bed for monsters. He married a woman named Erin about 6 years ago, and I want to be fair here, I tried. I really did try to like her from the start. She was polished, career-focused, always had somewhere important to be. Not my style, but not a crime either. The trouble started slow, the way trouble usually does. Little comments here and there. She didn't love how I organized her kitchen when I helped after she had my granddaughter Lily. She thought I gave the kids too many sweets. She mentioned more than once that I had old-fashioned opinions about things I honestly don't remember having opinions about at all. I let it go. You let a lot go when you love your grandchildren and you want to be part of their lives. What Erin never seemed to factor in, what maybe she genuinely didn't know because Michael never told her, is that I wasn't just his mother showing up empty-handed asking for pie. For the past 9 years, since Michael and Erin bought their house, I had been quietly paying part of their mortgage. Not because they were destitute, because after my husband passed, I inherited his life insurance and a decent pension, and I had more money sitting in an account than one old woman needs. Michael had gone through a rough stretch with a business that failed, and rather than watch my son lose his home, I stepped in. $1,100 a month, automatic transfer, quiet as a church mouse. I never once brought it up at dinner. I never once used it as leverage. That's not who I am. I also paid for both grandchildren's private school tuition. I covered Lily's braces. When Erin's car broke down 2 years ago, I wrote a check for the repair and told her not to mention it to Michael, because I didn't want him feeling like less of a provider. I did all of this because that's what you do for family. You don't do it for credit. You don't do it hoping someone will owe you. So when I got that text sent, not called, texted for days before the holiday, my hands actually went a little cold. It said, and I'm going to read it to you exactly as I saved it because I saved everything. Mom, this is hard to say, but Erin doesn't feel comfortable having you at Thanksgiving this year. She feels like you judge her and it makes the whole day tense. We think it might be better if you sit this one out. We still love you. We still love you. As if that sentence undoes the first 3. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after I read that. I thought about all the holidays I'd hosted at my own house before they had kids, driving myself half to death making 3 pies because nobody could agree on flavor. I thought about the year I drove through actual snow white-knuckled, because Michael said the kids would be disappointed if Grandma wasn't there. I thought about $1,100 a month every single month for 9 years, and I did the math right there at my kitchen table. That's over $118,000. $118,000, and I was uncomfortable to have in the house for one dinner. Now, I want to be honest with you because these stories only mean something if they're honest. My first instinct was hurt, not anger. I actually considered just letting it go, staying home, eating a sandwich by myself, and pretending everything was fine when Michael called to check on me afterward, the way he always does the guilty conscience call 2 days later. I've spent a lifetime being the peacemaker. It's a hard habit to break. But then I thought about my late husband, Harold. No, wait, I won't use that name. Let's just say my husband, who used to tell me, Barbara, you are the softest, hard-nosed woman I've ever met. Don't let people mistake your kindness for your spine. And something about sitting there with that text glowing on my phone made me remember I still had a spine. So here's what I did. I didn't call Michael and scream. I didn't send back a wounded, guilt-tripping novel of a text message, even though God knows I drafted 3 of them. I typed back exactly 4 words. Understood. Enjoy your dinner. Then I picked up the phone and called my bank. The automatic transfer to Michael and Aaron's mortgage account, the one that had been running like clockwork for 9 years, I canceled it. Effective immediately. I also called the private school where Lily and Noah are enrolled and asked what the process was for removing myself as the secondary tuition payer, since the account had been set up under both my name and Michael's for tax purposes. I didn't cancel that one outright, I'm not a monster and those are innocent children, but I did tell the administrator I needed to restructure how the payments were being made, which meant Michael was about to get a very unexpected email about tuition being due in full from his account instead of mine. Then I called my nephew, my sister's boy, who's a financial planner, and I asked him a question I probably should have asked years ago. What would it look like if I updated my will? He walked me through it that same afternoon. By the time the sun went down, I had a new appointment scheduled with my estate attorney for the following Monday. I didn't do any of this out of spite, and I need you to understand that because it would have been so easy to. I did it because that text made something click into place for me that I think deep down I'd known for a while and didn't want to face. I had spent almost a decade being generous to people who saw my generosity as a given, not a gift. And the moment I stopped being useful in the exact shape they wanted, I became uncomfortable. I decided it was time my finances reflected the actual relationship I had, instead of the one I'd been pretending to have to keep the peace. Thanksgiving morning came. I made myself a small breakfast, put on a nice sweater because I refused to sit around in my robe feeling sorry for myself, and I drove myself to the community center where they were hosting a holiday meal for seniors in my area. I'd seen the flyer weeks earlier and honestly never thought I'd be the one attending instead of dropping off a casserole. I sat with a lovely widower named, well, I'll just say a lovely widower, and a retired schoolteacher who told the funniest stories about substitute teaching gone wrong. We laughed more that afternoon than I think I'd laughed in months. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I planned. But it wasn't the sad, lonely one Michael probably pictured me having either. Meanwhile, over at Michael and Aaron's house, dinner was apparently going along just fine without me, for about the first hour. I only know what happened next because Michael told me himself later in a conversation I'll get to. Aaron's mother was there, along with Aaron's sister and her family. Somewhere between the turkey and the pie, Aaron's mother, who apparently didn't know I'd been asked not to come, and had always liked me from the 2 or 3 times we'd met, asked where I was. Michael, according to his own retelling, fumbled through some vague answer about me not feeling up to it. Aaron's mother, being nobody's fool, apparently pressed a little, and the truth started leaking out at the table in that horrible way truths do when you're not prepared for them. Then, almost on cue, Michael's phone buzzed with the email from Lily's school about the tuition payment structure change. He stepped into the other room to read it, and according to him, his stomach dropped straight through the floor. He called the school back the next business day and learned that the automatic partial payment from B. grandmother had been removed, effective this billing cycle, and the full balance was now due from the primary account holder. Then his bank alert came in, the one notifying him his mortgage autopay had failed because a linked contribution didn't process. He said he sat there at his own Thanksgiving table, doing math in his head, while his mother-in-law kept asking pointed little questions about family and gratitude that Aaron very clearly did not appreciate. By his account, dinner ended early. Aaron's mother left looking troubled. Aaron and Michael got into a hushed argument in the kitchen that their own kids could hear from the hallway, with Lily asking why Daddy sounded upset. And somewhere around 8 o'clock that night my phone rang. Michael. I almost didn't answer. Then I decided I'd earned the right to hear him grovel, so I picked up. He didn't even say hello properly. He just said, "Mom, did you cancel the mortgage payment?" I said, calm as I've ever been in my life, I did. Dead silence on the other end. Then, Mom, why would you do that? We need that money. And here's the part I'm proudest of because I didn't raise my voice once. I said, Michael, 4 days ago your wife decided she was uncomfortable having me in your home. I respected that. I'm not going to force my presence anywhere I'm not wanted. But I also can't understand why you'd expect me to keep quietly funding a household I'm not welcome to sit down in. That doesn't feel like family to me. That feels like being useful. I'm done being useful to people who are ashamed of me. He tried to backpedal. He said Aaron didn't mean it like that it was about tension, not about money, that he never wanted me to feel unwelcome forever just for one dinner. I let him talk himself in circles for a good 2 minutes before I said the thing I've been holding onto all day. Michael, I have paid part of your mortgage for 9 years. I paid your daughter's braces. I've paid tuition for both kids since kindergarten. I have never once thrown that in your face, not one single time, because I never wanted you to think my love came with a price tag. But your wife looked at 9 years of quiet sacrifice and decided the problem was me sitting at your table. So I'm going to give her exactly what she asked for. She doesn't have to feel uncomfortable around me anymore. I won't be around. He got quiet. Really quiet. Then he said, very small, Mom, please don't do this. We can't afford the mortgage without your help right now. Things have been tight. And I said, gently, because despite everything, he is still my son and I do still love him. Then I'd suggest you and Aaron have an honest conversation about what uncomfortable is actually costing you. I could hear Aaron in the background asking what was going on, her voice climbing higher with every word Michael said back to her. I heard him say, muffled like he'd covered the phone, she canceled the mortgage payment. And the school thing. And I heard Aaron, not muffled at all, say something I won't repeat on this channel, followed by a very tense silence. Michael got back on the phone and asked, almost pleading, if we could talk properly in person, not on Thanksgiving night with everyone upset. I told him that was fine. I told him I'd meet him for coffee, just the two of us, no Aaron, because frankly I wasn't ready to be in a room with her yet. I also told him plainly that I wasn't going to simply resume the payments like nothing happened. If I was going to keep supporting his household, it would be because I was welcome in it, genuinely welcome, not tolerated for the sake of my checkbook. We met 3 days later at a little diner I've gone to for 20 years. Michael looked like he hadn't slept. He apologized, really apologized, not the limp, half-hearted kind. He told me Aaron had said some things in the days since that made him realize just how much resentment she'd been carrying toward me for years, resentment he'd never fully clocked because he'd always just tried to keep the peace between us rather than actually address it. He admitted, and this part surprised me, that some of what Aaron felt wasn't really about me at all. It was about feeling like she could never measure up to the version of family I represented, and rather than working through that, it had curdled into treating me like an inconvenience. That didn't erase what happened. I told him so. I told him that understanding where someone's resentment comes from doesn't obligate me to keep absorbing it. I told him I loved my grandchildren fiercely and that had nothing to do with this, and I would always show up for them. But I would not keep quietly financing a household that was ashamed to have me sit at its table. We came to an arrangement that felt fair to both of us. I resumed a portion of the mortgage support, but not all of it, and I set it up as a formal, documented loan through my attorney rather than a quiet gift, which frankly protects me and gives me something I never had before: a paper trail and actual leverage if this ever happens again. I kept my new will exactly as my nephew had helped me draft it, with adjustments that reflect the relationship as it actually exists, not the fantasy version I'd been pretending was true for years. And I told Michael clearly that any future holiday invitation needed to come from both him and Aaron together sincerely, or it wasn't happening at all. It's been about 2 months since that Thanksgiving now. Aaron and I had one very awkward, very necessary conversation over coffee about 6 weeks ago. She apologized. I don't know if I fully believe every word of it yet, but I believed enough of it to give things another chance, slowly, on my own terms this time. I spent Christmas with them. I sat at that table. Nobody said they were uncomfortable. And for the first time in longer than I care to admit, I didn't feel like I was auditioning for a place in my own son's family. I felt like I belonged there because they wanted me there, not because my bank account made me convenient. I think about that forward text message I sent back sometimes: understood. Enjoy your dinner. And I don't regret a single letter of it. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't remind them of everything I'd done for them. Not once, not even in anger. I simply stopped pretending that quiet generosity has to mean quiet suffering. Respect isn't something you're owed just because you share blood with someone. It's something you build every single day, at every single table you're invited to sit at. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden by the very people you sacrificed everything for, I want you to know something. It is never too late to remember your own worth. 72 years old. And I learned that lesson at my kitchen table on a Tuesday in November, and it changed everything. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight. I read every single one, and knowing how far these stories reach means more to me than you know. I've got plenty more of these to share, so stick around, because sometimes the quietest woman in the room is the one you should have never underestimated.